Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today we are sitting down once again with the great James Benham. James is not only a friend personally, but also a friend of the podcast. But more than that, he is the CEO of JB Knowledge, an information technology services company, as well as the CEO of TerraClaim, a claims management and benchmarking system company. But that's not all. James also hosts a couple of podcasts himself. First off, the Contact Crew, and then also the InsurTech Geek podcast. So if you've been listening to previous episodes of the Mobile Workforce Podcast, we've had James on in the past. It was episode number 32, and we talked a lot about the importance of the 4Bs in technology. Today, we want to recap the developments that we saw in construction in 2021 and also talk about what's on the horizon for 2022. So enough of the prelude. Let's get to talking. James, welcome on the podcast today, and thanks for joining us.
Howdy, glad to be here.
Awesome. I always love the Texas howdy. You're great at delivering that line.
It's a great word. It sums up all kinds of things. It's a very efficient word.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. I appreciate that. All right. So, of course, last time we talked a little bit about your infamous, which is more than famous for those that don't know the reference there, the construction technology report that you guys have done for many years. And it's kind of a Bible in the industry for, like I said, probably a decade now. So what is that report for those that may not know, and kind of what can you share with us about what you guys are doing there?
Yeah, it's been just a market study that we decided to embark on 10 years ago to find out who was using what and how much of it, right? I mean, it's used to measure budget. I mean, really important one for everybody, not just construction tech companies, is how much construction companies are spending on technology. And then when they're spending on technology, what are they buying? What segments are they buying in? It was really cool in the early days because it's in its 10th year right now. It was really cool in the early days because we saw the rise of smartphones and the rise of wearables and Apple Watches and the rise of IoT and cloud-based solutions. I mean, it was crazy just to watch it happen numerically. Like, anecdotally, you see more people using things, but it's really good to get. I mean, mind you, this has been one of the most exhaustive surveys in construction. Most surveys you see have like 1 to 200 results or an average survey, and we're like 2 to 3,000, right? I mean, it's a pretty big deal. It takes about 15 minutes to fill out, and believe it or not, it's a major deal to get that many people to spend that much time on it.
Yeah, and I've personally gone through that and actually filled out the survey numerous years. And I, as a technologist myself, I absolutely love the questions that you're asking, and I can see that you're not trying to get just a few graphs and charts for a slide deck. I mean, you're really trying to dig in and find out what is really going on out there.
Yeah, it's like 57 pages of content. I mean, it takes a year. I mean, just to prepare for it, do it this year. Little sneak peek. We actually got a really cool data science team at A&M to help us out, really digging in even more into the day. A&M's been a partner for a long time. They're the largest construction program in the United States. They've got some brilliant people. As they would say in Boston, they're wicked smart. And they've really helped us, break down the data, look for correlation and causality. We've done a lot of that work for a long time, but they've been helping us out for a few years, and they did a phenomenal job this year.
Yeah, I love to hear that, and I know, every year there are differences. There definitely is movement in that needle. What did you see change, or what stood out to you in 2022 survey versus?
Yeah, the 21. So I can't really comment on the 21 survey because we're still prepping it, but
all right.
We're seeing more movement. I can just say in general broad strokes, higher adoption rates, slight upticks in spending. I mean, there's some things that you'll see As we come out with, I think a month from now, I have my first webinar on that for CFMA, and that's when I'll really break down some of the early results and the data that's coming in, and the whole report gets published at the end of November. So we're pretty close to be able to comment on it. But historically, over the last 9 years, we've seen a lot of trending on very, very slow increases in spending, slow increases on staffing, but rapid adoption rates on apps and mobility and wearables, which means they're doing this on like a shoestring budget with shoestring staff, and they're just kind of figuring it out as they go.
Would you say that is still surprising to you? I mean, I know it's kind of the old approach, it's still going on, but what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's disappointing that we're not seeing the value being placed on technology adoption by executives across the industry. You hear a lot of specific anecdotal evidence from some of the large super tech forward companies. Like if your entire news ecosystem was centered around DPR, Mortensen,
Hmm.
Turner,
Right.
and I
The
mean
little
like
guys.
J.E. Dunn. Like if we just took all the news that we read, you go to, um, oh man, there's like probably three others I take a hard look at that. If you just took these half dozen to 12 major big multi-billion-dollar contractors and you extrapolated that to the entire industry, you'd be like, man, we are rocking. Adoption's great. Staffing's
Mm,
great. But the reality is that's not what's happening.
right.
You have it's becoming a tale of diverging roads, where you have the big companies are doubling down on their investment, and most of the big companies are forming their own investment arms and actually funding startups. That's a huge change, right? That's a really, really big change and a major difference. And then you still have, I mean, remember, Mike, there's like what, uh 12,000 GCs that you can identify in the United States. There's like 28 to 32,000 subcontractors have that are like members of associations. It's really hard to get this data exact because there's a lot of overlap. If you looked at like the AGC membership and then some of the sub trades, and then you have a lot of overlap, so it's hard to deduplicate the list. But let's just assume you have like 12,000 GCs of note and 32 or 36,000 subcontractors of note. If you go to the whole ecosystem, though, it's hundreds of thousands of contractors combined, and so there's just a ton of them that are running on a paper napkin and going to Best Buy for their IT.
Oh yeah, you don't need to tell me that story, but it is, I love that you draw that distinction actually, because I don't know that there's enough looking into that data by the general audience, so to speak. I think we get excited about those statistics that they're not padded. They're looking at a very small segment, the upper echelon of builders, and like you mentioned, companies that have cash to spend 300 million to buy a software company instead of write their own, right, and tailor it to their own needs. But the general market, I think, to your point, they're just not moving as fast as I think they ought to. And what do we do? How do we? I know what you're doing is definitely helping. You're raising awareness, which is step one. What else can other technology companies like mine and the others that are in our industry do to help really lift this boat out of the water a little bit?
Well, yesterday I went to Texas Southern University. It's an HBCU that I'm a regent. I'm on their board of regents, and I was listening. We had Jamie Dimon there, CEO of JP Morgan. Like, amazing. I got to talk to him for 5 minutes. It was really cool. He gave a great speech. And one of the things that really stood out to me is that you have to be a lifelong learner. That was like the number one message for our students. And by the way, for all the adults in the room, like he reads 4 newspapers a day, cover to cover. I mean, he's 4 a day, and he reads books all the time, and he's really obsessed with learning. Um, and he said there's only 2 ways you can learn things: read stuff and talk to people. I mean, and he's right. Like that's it. You read stuff, talk to people. I guess you could lump in watch YouTube into the read stuff. And so the only solution is education, right? That's it. I mean, you all of us in the construction tech space have to educate. We have to teach before we sell. And I've had a mantra for a long time here at JB Knowledge, 20 years in business now, is that we entertain first. In other words, we want to, keep people awake, entertain them. We want to educate them second, and then in the last minute, we want to sell. Like we'll explain what we do at the end. But as long as entertainment's that little narrow sliver on the front end, and selling is that really really tiny narrow sliver on the tail end. But as long as the middle 80 to 90% is education, then if we're all really just investing in educating people, as my buddy Buck Davis says, win friends. He says, make friends and help people. Make
I
friends and
like
help
that.
people. And so if you focus on education, on helping people, making friends, then it's going to take all of us educating the industry to continue to lift it up and to show it that there's a better way of doing things.
That's a great point. Again, education, love that. I think the entertainment value, you got to get their attention to begin, and I think there's a fair amount of that. I mean, social media has helped. There's some fun Instagram, channels and different things on YouTube, like you say. Maybe things that are maybe not just silly, but very interesting. We've got a customer, Yeti Welding is their name. Actually, they were guests on the podcast. Had them on talking about the importance of social media and the role it plays in their marketing arm, and just amazing. The fascinating work that this small welding shop does is incredible. And I think just raising awareness of what design ideas and what technologies there are. He's got a big plasma cutter, and it's just some really cool tech for a really small company. I don't even know if the kid's 30 years old yet, and so I love what he's doing and how he serves his customers. But it's back to you know we've got to, as an industry, do a better job of in terms of the tech sector. We got to do a better job of figuring out how to bring the people in to fill those seats so they can pay attention to what's going on around them, because the rest of the world is just buzzing with this tech everywhere you turn, and construction just isn't enjoying the opportunities that are out there right now.
Awesome. Yeah, totally agree.
So tell me, as far as 2021 goes, what are you seeing that's kind of sizzling out there in software? Is there something that stands out to you that's being adopted better, or that's going to be more impactful this coming year?
Yeah, certainly analytical engines are hot topics. So BI is a big deal. BI has become a much much bigger deal. Utilizing, and just to delineate the difference for people, business intelligence software is like reporting software on steroids, right? So if you had to compare Crystal reports and SQL Server reporting services, and if you had to compare these old early to mid 2000s report writers to what we have in BI software is far more powerful. It can ingest and process far more data, not just structured data, but unstructured data. It has much better visualization tools. And the good BI software incorporates machine learning that allows you to look for correlation, causality, and trending that you just couldn't pull off in the old Crystal Reports world of the mid 2000s or the early 2000s when I started JB Knowledge in '01. So I really am seeing a crop of new analytics companies come to construction to start helping construction companies chew on all the data they've been generating. I'm also seeing, we had this advent of the app, the mobile app. That's no longer a differentiating factor. Like everybody needs to have one. They're really easy to build now. If you build everything in React, then you can build it once and deploy it multiple times and make minor modifications to deploy to React Native. So, I mean, there's not the hurdles there used to be to building mobile apps. So, mobility is almost a foregone conclusion and a right to play. I definitely this year saw a lot more applications getting much, much, much smarter. Um, just data input, data output, and processing of data, which is kind of the definition of software. You input data, you process and store it, you output it. That's not enough anymore. It's just not enough to really make it in a market. You got, and so that's one thing I've seen really, really, really come up is smart analytic systems. Like, a good one to look at, like Brick, has hung their entire hat on providing analytical services that the ERPs don't provide on the ERP data. and using robotic process automation to acquire the data when APIs don't allow you to get it.
Yeah, and for the listeners, that brick is BRIQ, just in case you're looking.
Websites br.iq. Right, that's a good example because they're using machine learning and RPA to gather the data. Like literally RPA is like software robots that crawl into an application and extract the data the hard way, because not all data is available through an API. So that's one example. You look at like New Metrics, which was formerly SmartVid by Josh Kanner. I mean, Josh built the ultimate workflow tool in Vela, and he sold it to Autodesk. He has a workflow tool in New Metrics, but fundamentally, 90% of his effort appears to be going towards analytical capabilities, not data input, output, and processing. Right? That was the easy part. Was uploading, storing, and retrieving photos and unstructured data. That was the easy part. Processing it, and then what he did was brilliant during COVID was all of his mass compliance reports. That was fantastic.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
fantastic. I mean, that's a wonderful example of something that never would have been available 10 years ago. That now you have one provider who has billions of photos across job sites across the country, and he can say, hey, I've got a statistically relevant set of data. Here's a mass compliance report by region. That was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I like that you drew the distinction between structured and unstructured data, because I think that's an important thing to note.
Well, we just didn't have a lot of capabilities to process and report on unstructured data 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago. It started getting a little bit better, but now you've got NoSQL. You have NoSQL, non-structured, non-relational databases. And we're not going to geek out too much on like the actual components behind it, but you got so many good solutions in that realm that what you're seeing now is a much more coherent set of solutions that don't get crippled by large scale, right? Like they can process 1 billion photos a day, and it's not a big deal because it's not going in a relational database. You don't have to worry about primary and foreign key constraints and having to rebuild all your indexes and all the crap you do with databases. It's not, you don't have to do that, and so the tooling has gotten so good that we're able to really. I mean, here's another one, like Wint, which is water intelligence. Instead of putting sensors everywhere, they didn't even build a sensor. In fact, I think you're going to continue to see companies that started as hardware companies find other hardware partners and just focus on the analytics, which you've seen, like Doxel did that. We can run through the laundry list of people who shut down doing that. Like Skycatch did that. All these folks that said we're going to build hardware, and they're like, oh, never mind, it's too hard, because it is too hard. Went got an off the shelf solution that someone already had built that went on a water main, and then just it could tell you flow, and then what they did is they attached their software to that flow gauge so that they could detect and learn what a sink leak looks like versus what a toilet leak looks like versus what a water main leak looks like. And so now, instead of putting 20 million sensors, you just, if you have an 8-floor building, you put 8 of these devices, one on every floor. And then you can say, hey, you got a toilet leaking on the third floor. You got a toilet leaking on the 5th floor. You got a sink leaking on the 3rd floor. So, you got to do a little bit of troubleshooting, but nowhere close to the troubleshooting you had to do before. That's a really good example of a company that partnered with a hardware manufacturer that was already building this sensor, and then built a phenomenal analytics suite sitting on top of it, and then started providing data no one ever thought you could get, just by identifying that a sink leak looks different than a toilet leak at the water main on the floor. Like, that's cool, right? And so I think you're going to continue to see people drop out of the hardware market, and the Trimbles of the world are going to continue to grow more. Trimble, Leica, DeWalt, Milwaukee, all the people that actually make stuff for a living are going to grow in power. The smart ones will open an API up so they can partner on hardware, and then allow really good software companies like Hilti, who I really was convinced was really behind the game on automated tooling. Hilti's a phenomenal tool company. So is Milwaukee. So is DeWalt. By the way, they're all great. I've been to all their headquarters. The U.S. headquarters, right? The U.S. companies. Some of these guys are most of these guys are headquartered in other countries, but I've visited all of them, and they build really good hardware. And I was convinced that like Hilti was way behind the game. Then they roll out the JBot, and the JBot is like, holy cow! Talk about throwing the gauntlet down. I mean, here's a fully automated system that uses a robotic total station and their drill with their batteries, to drill a bunch of holes and then spray paint markings by what trade goes in that hole. I mean, it's going to completely transform people attaching to ceilings and floors, right? It's going to totally change the game.
Yeah, it's fascinating that, like you say, I mean, I know, Hilti, they've got their tool tracking app now, and then and DeWalt acquired a small GPS, hardware company, and started integrating some of that. So I think, to your point, they're finding ways to bring other expertise into their tool manufacturing business, and hopefully that the innovation will continue to happen as it has, and more than that, for our industry, what are builders doing? What are construction companies that are actually putting these structures up doing to adopt this type of approach better? And I think, to your point, they're not doing it fast enough. So we got to
Most
figure
are
out how to.
not doing it fast enough,
Right.
but there's a small percentage. Let's just spitball it at 10%.
Mm-hmm.
That are doing 90% of the innovation. You do the 80-20 rule. I think here it's like the
Yep.
90-10 rule.
Yeah.
Because they have their own VC arms, their funding, like Stanley Black & Decker has SBD Ventures, and like these big companies are forming venture groups and investing. They realize they can't do it all themselves, and they're like, well, if we can't do it all ourselves, we'll just start seed funding all these other companies, and we'll buy them later.
Yeah. Well, I think, and back to your point on integration and these other things of how are we sharing our expertise and technology, making it available to other experts in the space to find other solutions to implement our systems. And that's something, in the software for construction space, that's key today. If you don't have APIs and connectivity that is automated, then it's a, like you've used the term before, it's a 90s solution to a 2020 problem. Well, tell me about wearables. I mean, what are you seeing there, and how do you feel like that's going to shake out this next year as far as consumption of that opportunity?
A lot slower ramp up than I was hoping.
Hmm.
Of course, an Apple Watch is a wearable. So
Yeah.
smartwatches went bonkers. And smartwatches are doing so much stuff now, Mike. Like, holy crap. The new Apple Watch, you have slip, trip, fall sensors in your watch now. You've got EKG monitors in your watch. Like, a lot of
Right.
things that were dedicated hardware products.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the phone. Those memes on the internet. They're like, these 8 products in a Radio Shack ad are now in your one
Right.
iPhone.
Right.
Same thing's happening with the watch. Like, when you look at, we had dedicated heart rate monitors. We had dedicated EKG. We had dedicated slip, trip, fall that are clipped to your belt, right?
Yeah.
And the Apple Watch Series 7 has all of that.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Apple Watch and whatever Google calls their watches should show you how much of a crap I give about Google Android Wear. I mean, I just don't like their watches very much, but they're doing the same thing. In general, Android has all this stuff before Apple does. Apple just executes it better,
Mm-hmm.
and their market share reflects that, right?
Right.
So I think as the watches continue to get better and better and better and better, and they open up more and more and more of it to APIs and software development kits, that you're going to have basically these supercomputers on your wrist that are going to tell people in construction most of what they want to know.
Yeah.
The big question is whether Apple is going to get into glasses, right? That's the big
Mm-hmm.
question, is whether they jump into augmented reality. I'm sure they have in that big old UFO size headquarters they have over in Cupertino. I'm sure they've got a lab building AR hardware. Microsoft and HoloLens, that's a wearable, right? It's a computer interacting with your biology, scans your retina. Pretty cool. Like the new HoloLens 2, amazing device. HoloLens 1 was an amazing device. But you're not seeing rampant adoption. Again, I'm seeing like 10% of companies adopt these, and everybody else go, huh? That looks like a video game. Well, it's actually built on video game technology. But so I think the future of wearables is interesting. You've also seen in the last 2 years, and I got to try Hilti's new exoskeleton out. These non-powered, so you're talking about unpowered biomechanical exoskeletons that are wearable. It's wearable technology. Just because it doesn't have a battery, something doesn't have to be electronic to be technology, right?
Right. Right.
John Deere's first invention was a plow. It
Yeah.
was not.
Yeah.
It was not a tractor. It was a
Yeah.
plow. It was a blade. It that was the big invention. That's technology. So I think exoskeletons are getting super small, super lightweight, and really useful. Both, upper body, arm exoskeletons, and back, lower back, and then leg. So I think exoskeletons are going to be standard PPE in the next decade.
Hmm.
And as
Interesting.
HoloLens continues to evolve and get better and better and better and better, and if it definitely if Apple jumps in that game, visual wearables are going to be hot. Watches are going to solve just about everything else that you want a wearable to do.
Yeah.
That and rings, because you can read some additional biometrics off of rings. And Amazon bought one of the major wearable companies. Speaking of Amazon, don't forget about them. They own Ring, the security company, and they just rolled out a construction job site security kit for Ring. It's
Interesting.
construction job site security in a box provided by Amazon. Now, don't
Wow.
you think Amazon's going to start using that to calculate how big your material piles are and start offering to sell you materials and goods?
Oh yeah. Smart. Yes.
Like,
Smart
because Amazon's
analytics.
got to be eyeing the construction material business.
Yeah. That's marketing, right?
Yeah, and they have their entire own fleet now. They have their own airplanes. They have their
Yeah.
own Prime vans. They don't need FedEx or UPS. They're end to end. Now they're going to put cameras on your job site. Then they're going to start telling you, "Hey, you're low on lumber. You want some more?"
Yeah. Right. Unbelievable. Wow. And then I can see in the
And they're in
future,
wearables. They have the
automatically
rings.
ordering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once those materials are consumed, you may get set up on an auto ship, right?
Why wouldn't you? They're going to auto
Right.
ship your house.
Right. Exactly. So what about, I mean, we talked about, the VR and the AR, XR.
Yeah, super cool solutions. In the last year, I've been so pleased with the software updates I've seen for VR and AR. Again, AR is when you can see the world around you. VR is when you're completely closed off, right? That's the fundamental difference. Players like Revisto, and I had Revisto on the podcast recently on Content Crew. They are slaying it. They have so many users now. Just go listen to that episode. They have so much adoption across the planet, and they've got some really sweet, tight VR integration. And they're not even the only ones, right? I mean, Iris did a great job on VR for construction. Visual Live is being used by a bunch of progressive contractors I know for augmented reality with HoloLens and iPad, doing great. And there's more and more and more of these solutions out there that are just Argyle's another one that I put a video of in one of my presentations. That's just so freaking sweet. It's on site out in the open air in sunlight via augmented reality, which actually is really hard to pull off. Indoor augmented reality is a lot easier to pull off. Outdoor gets complicated because the sun can actually be too bright and it can cause problems with the cameras reading terrain and then placing objects on it. But I mean, they're doing on-site outdoor AR, which is like the most challenging kind of AR to do. And it looks good. Like, it looks really good. So you're seeing a bunch of software providers come out with a really nice enterprise solutions for direct integration into Revit and the model and your project management system and integrating that in the field. And then Microsoft continues to evolve HoloLens. The only glasses I give a crap about are Microsoft HoloLens. Everything else is second rate that I have tested. Now, there may be stuff I haven't tested and seen, but not much. And so, not much that's commercially available. So, I'm AR and VR has always been somewhat contingent on the hardware. The other huge thing that happened in the last 2 years, last year and a half, is the last two versions of the iPad Pro have LiDAR. The last two versions of the iPhone have LiDAR. The Pro iPhone, the Pro iPad, LiDAR. And it's good LiDAR. Like, there are simple, good apps to produce a 3D mesh map of a room now on your dang phone. And so that makes AR and VR on your phone way better. Way better. Because on the VR side, you can use it to map your position, and you can do a iPhone-based VR headset. And on AR, it allows it to map objects and anchor through like spatial anchors from Azure. You can throw spatial anchors on a specific location and have a reasonable certainty it's going to stick to the object you stick it to because it LiDAR actually scans the room.
Wow. Truly fascinating. Who would have thunk 10 years ago that we could be here? Not me. So what about 3D printing? I know we talked about that the last time we had you on. What are you seeing that adoption rate here in the States pick up
Well,
or no?
no, I'm seeing new companies starting and doing it.
Okay.
This is
Okay.
one of those things. I think it's so fundamentally disruptive
Yeah.
that I think you're going to see more VC money flowing in,
Okay.
and it already is.
Right.
I believe this year was yet another new record on VC money flowing into Construct Tech. So let's just take a couple examples. 2 examples. Icon in Austin and Fast Brick Robotics with the Hadrian X robot in Australia. Both of these companies have now, they're using different methods. Fast Brick's 3D printing with blocks, and Icon's 3D printing with liquefied concrete that then sets and form in place. Both have built houses. Both have municipal involvement. Both are pretty impressive because like Fast Brick is gaining municipal certifications and they're passing engineering tests, like the things you need for people to actually occupy a building, right? That's something that we have to think about. And so I'm excited about the new companies that are starting because I'm really not seeing a ton of existing companies disrupting
Right.
themselves on this. It's going to take new companies. And then you really look at what's becoming a bridge printer. And I love what Jeremy Searock, and he's the chief technology officer at the bridge company in Pittsburgh that started the robotics company that is producing the TieBot and the IronBot. And what he's doing is piece by piece they're building a bridge printer. Instead of trying to build a bridge printer, they tackled their first and biggest problem. They couldn't get labor to tie a rebar, so they created a computer vision system with a robot that can identify where 2 pieces of rebar intersect, and it drops down and ties it. And then like, okay, well, our next big hurdle is getting the iron to the TieBot, right? So then they invented the IronBot, and it rides on the rails over the bridge. So what's happening is they're using traditional bridge construction techniques to, build the core infrastructure of the bridge, the core structure, and then they're putting their printers on the rails and having it do laying the rebar and then tying it. And I think concrete will be next. I think they'll have one that'll just follow behind it and actually pour the bridge. Like, why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't you? You've already done 2 other pieces. So I think that's what 3D printing is going to be very specific, just like robotics. It's not going to be like a humanoid robot that builds bridges or a humanoid robot that builds a building. You're going to have all these function and form specific things like Dusty Robotics that just does layout. Like it's just a little tiny little robot that prints the layout. That's really where you're seeing the innovation in 3D printing, and Fast Brick printing bricks and using adhesive instead of mortar. Icon using like proper concrete 3D printing, but like it's for real. Like they've partnered with a major home builder in the Austin area, and they're printing houses. Like they're going for it.
Really?
But they got to get certification and approval that it meets code.
Yeah, that's the hurdle for sure, no question about it. Well, what about robot? You mentioned robotics in different forms and fashions, but I was just at a NECA event, National Electrical Contractors Association, and I saw the robotic dog at the Trimble booth. What are you seeing happen there? I'm seeing and hearing more in the news about what they're doing.
They make a lot of news because they're cool.
Mm-hmm.
Form, function, specific robots, not humanoid robots.
Right. Yeah, performing a task that's hard to do safely as a human, temperature or gases or other things that aren't safe.
Yeah, so I mean, you're sending Spot in to deal with something that you don't want to send a human into, or Spot just walks on the job site and 3D scans it every day, so you have real time daily as builds. That's really cool. Of course, drones are robots too. And they're fully autonomous now. I don't hand fly any of my drones.
Right.
So that's super cool. And then you get into, but of course, the most common robots are software robots. People just kind of forget that like, what makes a robot a robot? Well, autonomy.
Automation. Yeah.
Automation, autonomy. Not just automation, like the ability to adapt and make a decision from an adverse environment. That's the difference, right? Like it's autonomous, that it can respond to a product like drones are. If a drone senses an obstacle, it'll reroute around the obstacle and resume the flight path. Like that's autonomy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And we're seeing that in terrestrial drones now, but you see it in software. I mean, I talked about software robots, RPA. That's a big
Yeah.
deal. So I think the real opportunity is in software robots, and then hardware robots are going to keep coming along. I mean, Roombas are super common in houses now.
Hmm.
Husqvarna has made lawn maintenance robots pretty common. They're for sale in Lowe's.
Hmm.
So the consumer market is a harbinger of what's to come in the industrial market, because as people get super comfortable with robots performing routine functions at their house, they become more comfortable with
Yeah,
robots performing routine functions at the office. If the iPhone had not been a big consumer hit, I don't think it would have been a big commercial hit.
that's right.
But people installed apps and they're like, why don't I have an app for the stuff I use at work? And that
Yeah.
began the whole revolution, right?
Yeah, that tide will not turn back now. It's only going to keep moving forward and grow. So, what are there any technologies that you've seen out there that you think, this particular thing just isn't ready yet? It's the wrong approach. It's too early. Need to reinvent or refigure some of that before companies jump in and start buying stuff they're never going to use or that's not going to do what they're intending it to do.
There's always lessons to be learned from failure, but we shouldn't be afraid of failure, and we shouldn't criticize it too heavily.
I like that. You're always saying geek out, right?
Yeah, you got
Try
to geek
stuff.
out and you got to embrace failure. I mean,
Mm.
Smart Bid, which became one of the largest bidding networks in the Western Hemisphere. I had 250,000 subs bidding on jobs.
Mm.
We sent out tens of millions of plans a week. I mean, it was pretty busy. That was the result of a completely failed product that I built. I
Mm.
built a bidding system for printing companies.
Okay.
Nobody bought it. So I
Huh.
mean, you learn from your failure, you pivot, you do something new, and all of a sudden this thing has a lot more applicability over in construction. So
Right.
I think it's important to learn from failure. The big one this year that I think everybody has to learn from is Katera. I
Mm.
mean, they flushed billions of dollars of SoftBank money down the toilet. I mean, they just liquidated and shut down, and people bought companies back. I mean, the nice thing is that a lot of the investors of SoftBank got shellacked on that deal, but not shellacked overall because other SoftBank plays worked out.
Hmm.
Um, but you end up with a lot of assets being disposed of pretty cheaply right now from
Mm.
Katera. But I think there's a lot to learn from that. Like I thought, man, integrating that many companies that fast, I didn't know how they were going to do it, and they didn't. They didn't pull it off. So I think that was too early. The concept of full multi-trade prefab, doing everything on a commercial building and a manufacturing floor, writing all of your own software. They tried to
Right.
eat an elephant in one bite, you know.
Mm.
And so I'm not happy that they didn't work out. And I need to make this really clear. I
Right.
don't celebrate that it didn't work out for them, but it is something to learn from. Just like I don't celebrate that my first 5 or 6 products failed miserably. I mean, I just am thankful I got to learn the lessons from them. And so I think that's what we got to look at is like what failed and why, and how do we learn something as an industry from it? And say, hey, maybe integrating this many companies together is a good idea, but maybe over 10 years, not one. Um, yeah, multi-trade prefab and full offsite construction. Um, it is very appealing, but maybe if you take a careful, measured approach to it, because you still have to worry about building safety. So I think that's the stuff that
Hmm.
I saw that didn't work out. That I was dismayed at that didn't work out. AR and VR has taken a long time to get to this point, man. I tell
Sure
you
have.
what, it's still just not mainstream yet. It's still in the niches, and so I'm hopeful that it'll really take off finally.
Yeah, we keep seeing signs and innovations that make it get closer, or they're close enough proximity that maybe this will impact that, and that will impact this. And I think, like you said, fail forward, right? If without embracing failure, we'd all still be on paper in construction, right? Well, so lastly, I just wanted to ask what, James Benham, the technologist, right? What gets you excited for 2022? What are you really excited about?
If you follow me at all, I geek out on risk tech, and I am geeking out on
Yep.
insurance, man. So that's what gets me excited because a lot of general contractors make more money on their insurance captive programs than they do on their GC fees. And so insurance drives the whole world. It drives, certainly I'm a pilot, it drives the aviation world. They decide who flies, not really the government. And the
Yep.
same thing in construction. If you can't get bonded, if you can't get insured, you're hosed. And
Yeah.
we gotten to work heavily with AXA XL. I'm so excited about their construction ecosystem, what they're doing there. And you've seen other carriers step in and really
Hmm.
partner with technology companies, of course, start venture funds. So, yeah, what am I geeking out on this year? 2022, the end of 21, 22, risk tech all the way. It's certainly in our investments. I'm investing heavily in our own products. I'm investing in other products. I mean, it's exciting to see what's going on in the area of insurance and risk management, how that applies to construction, because they're solving the risk management problem while solving productivity and technology. Like it's the big band-aid, not the little one.
Hmm.
And that really, really, really excites me because it's going to impact worker safety. It's going to impact productivity. It's going to impact job site safety. It's going to impact everything on the job. And it really fires me up. So we have two products: Smart Compliance, that's certificate of insurance
Hmm.
tracking. GCs track COIs on subs and suppliers, and we had a huge growth in that platform this year. I'm really excited about it. And then we built our own insurance claims product. A lot of contractors self-insure their
Hmm.
claims, and they self-administer their claims, or they're part of contractor groups that self-administer. And so we got deep into claims management. And guess where we started? Work comp, right?
Yeah. Right.
Why not? Because that's where the rubber hits the road, And our main goal there is to get people back to work faster. Um,
Mm.
that's a big goal in construction. We want to help prevent the accident. Then if it does happen, we want to help get them back to work faster. So I know it may seem a little nerdy, but
Hmm.
if you listen to my InsurTech Geek podcast, you can hear me talk to all the other InsurTech companies out there. InsurTech and Contech have a lot in common, and they have a lot to learn from each other, a lot to partner with each other, and risk tech in general, InsurTech gets me really, really excited. And so that's certainly where I'm spending my time.
Very interesting. And again, your whole life is about how do we take one process and improve it and trim the fat and remove the bottlenecks and get rid of the barriers. And fascinating that a guy that's so heavily invested in technology for so long, your whole career, that you're focusing on the other end of this. And I really like it. I appreciate that insight.
Yeah, I've got to keep doing something new, and certainly I'm trying to go up the value chain too, right? Like
Yeah.
I want to go to where the real problem is, and preventable mistakes, preventable mistakes, preventable mistakes, preventable mistakes eat more construction margin than almost anything else. Preventable mistakes cost lives, and so
Yeah.
that's why it's way up the value chain. So that's why insurance and risk management, um, while it may sound like something for the lawyers in the room, it's not. It's everybody's problem. It deeply impacts profitability and productivity. A safer
Great.
job site is a more productive job site.
Love it. That's a great way to end. Thank you, James. This was a pleasure and actually a lot of fun. Feel like we're just hanging out chatting, and I enjoyed our time again today.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, we'll do it again down the road. And until then, let's keep in touch. And thanks for all that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, and Gig'em Aggies, and let's hope my Aggies can win out, and Alabama loses to Auburn, and we go to the SEC championship. That's what I'm hoping right now. So I'm gonna put it out in the world and hope it comes back.
I just heard it. Good prediction. All right.
Yep.
Locked and loaded.
Thanks.
See you, buddy.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.